How do you build a high-performing culture? This is Culture Architects. Candid conversations with extraordinary leaders sharing their biggest successes, failures, and lessons learned on their culture journeys. Here's David J. Friedman.
Welcome back to my conversation with Stephen Shapiro and Nancy Shapiro Rapport, co-founders at Our Family Culture. In the previous episode, we learned about their 3-decade journey as educators and the story of how we began to collaborate around purposeful parenting. This time, we're going to get into the specifics of the Our Family Culture system and how that system can be used to make a meaningful and lasting impact on families. We've got this library of fundamentals then that people are going to choose from. How do you suggest that they pick them? I mean, it must be hard to pick ones out of a long list of them. I mean, who doesn't want their kids to be kind or doesn't want them to do the right thing? I mean, wouldn't I, if I was a parent, wouldn't I want all 44 of them?
Yeah. So you know how sometimes you download an app and you start playing with it and you have no idea what to do or how it's supposed to work? One of the things that we have done with this app is we've created some videos, and this is part of our desire to build community with our family culture. So the videos really welcome you and talk to you about what the fundamentals are and talk you through how to select them. And so, for example, one of the things that we recommend, if you are working with a parenting, we refer to a parenting partner instead of a spouse, because some people have a spouse and some people don't.
Sure.
And if you don't have a spouse, that doesn't mean you can't use our family culture. It means that you're either doing it yourself or you're working with someone that you're very close to, who is your parenting partner. But we recommend that you can either select them on the app directly, or you can download a PDF, which you'll receive after you sign up. We really recommend that you take some time and choose the ones that are most important to each of you independently, and then come back together and compare a little bit. So the ones that you both have put, clearly those are ones that you want to select. But you learn a little bit about your parenting partner when you have one on your list and your partner doesn't have one on their list. And then you have these very interesting conversations about why is that important to you, or why is that not important to you? And truth be told, I mean, just because you don't select a fundamental, there are a lot of them. And just because you don't choose one doesn't mean you don't care about it. So it engages people in really interesting conversations that the feedback we've received from people who've had the opportunity to choose their fundamentals has been so powerful. They've really enjoyed the experience. So we talk you through that process.
I would also add that one of the things that we find is a way to consider, like a lens to look at it, is imagine you're going to your parent-teacher conference for your child. What's something that their teacher could say about your kid that you would think like, oh, that's my kid. That's the kid I want to raise. And for some people, that's put in the work. Like when, to go in and have a teacher say, your kid is the hardest working kid that I've had in years. You're like, yes, that's my kid. For other people, it's like, include others. We had a kid move in and your kid was the one that went over and welcomed them to the class and made sure they had someone to eat lunch with. And you're like, that's my kid. So I think if you think, what is the thing that a teacher could say to you about your kid that would make you think, yes, that's the kind of kid we want to raise? Those are the fundamentals that we're encouraging families to choose.
Got it. I know, just for our audience sake, my daughter and son-in-law use the system, and similar to what Nancy was describing, when they chose their fundamentals, they each did them separately and then compared notes. And what they found was, okay, there were, maybe 2/3 of them they had both picked. And then they each talked about, okay, well, why did you pick the ones that you did that I didn't, and vice versa? And which of those do you feel most strongly about? So maybe I picked some that my wife might not have, but it's not that big a deal to me. And there's others that I might say, this is really important to me. And just that conversation, I think, is a pretty healthy conversation for parenting partners to have, regardless of the system.
Yeah, I think what you're raising is a really important point. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from families using the system that is actually helping them have a stronger marriage, because they're talking about their parenting values in a much more direct and open way. And so I think parents show up thinking they're trying to get great kids out of this, but I think the side effect is they're also getting a great marriage out of it as well. And I think there's, in addition to comparing your values and sharing these vulnerability questions where parents are hearing stories about each other that they didn't know, there's a third thing that's really great for couples. And that is that sometimes fundamentals are in conflict with each other. And I'll give you an example. So one of the fundamentals that I would choose that's important to me is fight for what's right. I want my kids to have a sense of justice and to stand up for the right thing. My wife might choose a fundamental called show respect because she thinks it's really important that kids show respect, especially to elders. So what might happen is one of our kids might find their teacher doing something that they think is unfair to another kid, and they may stand up for that kid.
Mm.
And when I hear the story, I'm thinking, good for my kid. They're fighting for what's right. I'm so proud. And my wife might hear the story and say, like, shame on my kid. They're not showing respect to their teacher, right?
Uh-huh.
And so in a normal situation, if you're not part of our family culture and you're not doing this work, you and your spouse just fight. And I say, I think it's great that they did that. And she says, I think it's terrible that they did that. But now, because we have the language and the fundamentals, I might say, I really love that our kid fought for what's right. And my wife might say, well, that's great, Stephen, but I wish that they would show respect when they did it. And I'm like, that's a good point too. And now we can have a conversation with each other and with our kid about how do you fight for what's right in a respectful way. And so instead of these two things being a point of contention amongst my spouse and myself, we can actually combine them and talk to our kid in a healthy way about them.
Yeah. It's interesting as I think about, again, the parallels between what I've learned in helping businesses to build culture and what we're talking about here is in the business setting. One of the things that I often say is that when a company is practicing a set of fundamentals, it changes the nature of coaching conversations, which is really what you're describing. And the way it changes is that the conversation becomes about the principle versus the person. That's so often in a business setting, you give somebody coaching and the team member feels like, well, why are you always picking on me? You're never satisfied with anything I do. And when we're not talking about you, we're talking about the principle. Remember, we said that, we need to be fanatics about response time. That's one of our principles here. So let's talk about what do we need to do to make sure we're getting back to this customer or this client in an appropriately timely way? Oh, yes, because we practice being a fanatic about response time. And what I hear you saying is the same kind of thing in a family setting that, okay, if we're giving, whether it's each other as parenting partners or our children, if we're giving them feedback about something they did or didn't do, and we can talk about what's the principle here, because our family has a principle, we call them fundamentals, but our family has a principle for how we do things in our family, then every coaching conversation, feedback conversation becomes one of the principles. These are the things that matter to us. And that's a pretty powerful thing that I think a lot of people don't think about in advance.
As you talk about that, I actually think about as the kids get older too, the kids being able to have those conversations with one another versus the parents having the conversation and sharing it with the child. So you're growing and learning together as a family.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also the interesting part about as this culture becomes integrated into your family, the kids may be having that conversation with their parents. So for example, if a parent says something unkind about a coworker, you can expect maybe your kid will say, hey, Dad, that doesn't sound like you're really practicing kindness right there.
Yeah.
And so we're actually all in this community together of culture building. It's not just parents trying to fix their kids.
Again, just drawing the parallels between what we've learned in business and what we're learning in families is a number of years ago, I did a series of surveys of clients asking them about the biggest impact that they saw of practicing fundamentals. And the thing that I found so interesting that was one of the most often cited impacts, and I'm going to say this because it also was unanticipated. It wasn't something they were expecting to get. They only realized it afterwards. I call it the power of a common language.
Right.
When we all know what we mean when we say be a fanatic about response time, or some of the other fundamentals we teach in business are things like practice blameless problem solving or get clear on expectations, that common language is a bonding thing. And I can see the same thing happening in families when we have language around practice kindness or do the right thing or roll with it or whatever our fundamentals are. We now have a common language that makes this us. This is our family. This is the way we do things here. And I think that's a pretty powerful thing.
I think it's huge. And I think almost all teams have that.
Yes.
You look at winning sports teams, they always have language around that. One of the great examples of this for me is there's a fundamental called leave it better than you found it. I suspect that a lot of families choose that one because they have messy kids. That may be the origin of why people choose leave it better than you found it. But once you choose leave it better than you found it and you practice it, the words leave it better than you found it are with you all the time. And so my family does not practice leave it better than you found it. But because I wrote the fundamental and wrote a lot of the content for it, I literally can't walk by something. I can't walk by a piece of trash on the ground without the words leave it better than you found it coming into my head. And I pick it up.
Yeah.
I just do it. It's like it becomes sort of a mantra that shows up whether you intend to or not. And so I think that the power of language is huge.
Yes.
Once you have a common language, it actually drives behavior.
Yeah. So talk about a little bit for our audience about the creation of this content. So we understand that we're going to choose a set of behaviors, which we call fundamentals. We're going to focus on one every week and practice it over and over again. And you're going to deliver content to families to help them have a brief engagement each day during the week. So where does that content come from?
The content comes from Stephen and I doing a lot of research and work and developing it. We are natural content creators as educators. We've brought in other really incredible educators to build content along with us. We have children's books that are aligned with each one of the family fundamentals. And that's especially for people who have younger kids and want to get started, because we all know the younger you start things with your families, the deeper ingrained they become. It's harder to start something with an older child who starts wondering why. And so we have children's books, and the children's books are designed to embed the fundamental into your family's conversation in a way that makes sense for the child. And so the content we wrote and sourced the content, and we continue doing that because each time you go through a round of your fundamentals, which is what we call it, once you've gone through all the weeks of however many fundamentals you've selected, we want you to have some fresh content the next time around. And so we're constantly thinking about the fundamentals, sourcing material. Here's what we don't want. We don't want parents to be like, I can do this. And by the way, you can. You don't need our family culture to do this. But what you end up doing is Googling, and how do I have this conversation? And how do I do this? And then you go down rabbit hole after rabbit hole and you get so lost. And so what we're trying to do is really source the best content that we can come up with ourselves and that we can find based on just all the incredible material and literature that's out there, and videos. I mean, Stephen, talk about your video experience.
I like to joke that I've watched all the seasons of YouTube. I mean, I spent hundreds of hours combing YouTube, and there are so many great 2-minute, 3-minute videos that align with every one of the fundamentals. And you can look for them yourself, but if you want to spend a couple hundred hours doing that, but we've done it for you. And so like really awesome short little videos that will just like bring the fundamental to life. And one other thing that we haven't talked about that we should mention is we're sending you something to do Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And you don't have to do it on those days, but we're doling it out in that way. You can see it the whole week. But on Wednesday, we have a special feature, which is called Wisdom Wednesday. And that's a day where it doesn't require you to have a conversation with your kids. It's just a 2-minute video of some great parenting wisdom. And some of that comes from us. Some of that we're sourcing from parenting experts and authors across the country. And eventually we'll be sourcing it from our own community. We'll be asking our own parents in our community, hey, what's the best piece of parenting advice you've ever gotten? And so this like 2-minute, just little tidbit of wisdom is going to come to you every week, which we think is going to be worth the price of admission, because you're getting just great little ideas that are actionable that you can bring to life in your family. Simple. And they're not aligned to any fundamental. They're just great ideas for how parents can make their family great.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about this whole idea of repetition. So a foundation of the system that we teach in businesses is this idea, I call them rituals, that a ritual is something that we do over and over and over again until it just becomes baked in. You brush your teeth every morning, you go to school every day or whatever you do, that they're just routines. And that the reason that these routines or rituals are important is because most people aren't very good at sticking with things. And we get excited about all kinds of new ideas, and then we get busy and it all falls by the wayside. But when something becomes a ritual, it's pretty easy to keep going. A lot of that concept is for any of our audience that has read James Clear's Atomic Habits, which is a wonderful book. If anybody hasn't read it that you're listening, you should read that book. But James Clear talks about the importance of creating habits for how we do things, because habits create the repetition. And when something is repeated enough, it becomes internalized. So in a business setting, the concept is, if we take these fundamentals, these behaviors, and we focus on one at a time each week, and we repeat that cycle over and over and over and over again, those behaviors start to become internalized. And so the thinking is the same thing would happen in families. And Stephen, you mentioned, the example of leave it better than you found it as just kind of like, it's just in your head. You just can't even walk past something without it becoming part of you. And it's the concept here as well, that if we create enough repetition, these behaviors, whatever the fundamentals are in this family over a period of weeks, months, years, just become second nature to our children. So talk about why that's so important.
Well, I mean, you are trying to learn anything. Hearing it once isn't enough. You have to always repeat and hear things in different ways and in different settings. And that's true for kids. When you think about how kids learn, it is practicing and doing things over and over again until they get it right, or until they learn a particular concept. And so for us, rituals that we would hope and encourage and teach families to do would be simple. So for example, I mean, I know not all families have the opportunity to have a family dinner every single night, but maybe you make sure that on Sunday night, you have a family dinner together so that you can talk about the fundamental of the week, because our fundamental cycle starts on a Sunday. And so maybe that is one small thing that you do. And
if you don't do dinner, maybe you go to church on Sunday, so you have lunch after church, or maybe it's the drive home from church when you introduce the family fundamental. It just fits into whatever your family does naturally.
Exactly. Things like putting your kids to bed, or when you wake up in the morning, what's something that you do that gives you just a quick minute to practice the fundamental. We've even talked about having people write their fundamental in the kitchen somewhere, so it's there and present, so that when kids walk to the refrigerator and it's hanging on the refrigerator, they remember what the fundamental is and they're practicing it. And then the best part is they're sharing it out in the world. It's not just that they practice it at home, they're sharing it out in the world. And we really believe that if especially, I want to speak out for a moment just about people who are single parents. I was a single parent. This stuff is hard work. It's hard when you have a partner. It's twice as hard when you don't. And so if you have people in your community, in your world, good friends that you spend time with, well, if you're both doing our family culture, or if a group of you are doing our family culture, you wouldn't necessarily need to have the same fundamentals. In fact, you probably wouldn't. But just the fact that you're practicing the same type of system encourages conversations. Like, what fundamental are you guys on this week? And what's something cool that happened last week with your family? Or which one are you excited to practice again coming up? So it provides that language in a very specific way. And those habits and rituals can be very small things. Like I said earlier, we're not asking you to add 30 minutes into your day. You don't have that time. It's where do you embed it into the things that you already view.
Yeah. I think about, that repetition and the importance of that repetition. And I think about probably most of us have things that we would say, oh, mom used to always say this, or dad used to always say that. And if you just kind of step back for a moment and think, well, that's really what repetition is about, is that when mom or dad used to always say that, I heard it enough times that it just sunk in. And so in a really simplistic way, this is really just a methodology to take the things that mom or dad always said and have enough repetition so that those things become internalized in people.
And what I love really about the system, and it's when we think back to how we started with a course that was deep and would only attract so many people at a time and was limited, what I love about our family culture is that it can reach anyone, anywhere, at any time. And it's such an accessible thing for people to do. You know, we don't learn how to be parents. We just don't get that kind of instruction. And we're not teaching anyone how-tos in our family culture. We're simply providing people with the types of prompts and questions and videos and quotes and things that you can do to really clearly identify what is important to us as a family and how are we going to practice that, rather than figuring it out as you go along, which is what most of us do.
Yes, most of us have done it that way.
Parenting in survival mode instead of parenting with purpose.
Yeah.
I would add to that, we just released this, Our Family Culture, recently. So it's a pretty new thing. We've been getting a lot of interest from around the world. It's been wild. A lot of people in Australia have been reaching out to us. We've had a really interesting Australian connection. A lot of people in Canada have been reaching out to us. We have had a conversation with a podcaster in India who's really excited about Our Family Culture. So what's beautiful about the system is it's simple, it's easy, it's affordable. Anybody can do it, but it's not, limited to people in our neighborhood or our community, or people who can show up at the, library for a meeting. I mean, we've got people around the world can build powerful families, and that's exciting to me.
Well, I think, something that you said there, Stephen, I think is really important. And that is that, and Nancy, you just referred to it a moment ago, we're not telling anybody in the system how to run their family. We're saying you should be purposeful about creating your family, whatever that may be. And every family may be different, but you ought to be doing that in a purposeful way and not leaving it to chance. And so the Our Family Culture system is really just a tool to enable families to do whatever it is that's important to them, but to do it purposefully. And that's why it would make sense that this isn't a United States kind of thing. It's a human thing. Everybody's got a family and everybody wants their family to be however they want it to be, but most aren't purposeful about doing it. And so if you could have a tool to make that, makes it easier.
Right. This is a really important point, David. I think we did a lot of focus groups in preparation for this. And many of the focus groups were with parents whose kids are grown. And one of the saddest things, honestly, I hear, and I hear it a lot, is parents with regret. We heard a lot of parents say, I really wish when our kids were younger, we would have. And it just breaks my heart a little bit, because almost everyone who has kids agrees that raising your kids, raising your family is the most important thing you'll do. Having great kids is the greatest source of pride. Work is great, but there's nothing that replaces the joy of a great family. And it's really sad to get to the end of that road and go, God, we should have focused more on this. I wish we had been more intentional or purposeful about this. And I think Our Family Culture is designed to help parents reduce the chance of them having that parenting regret. I wish we had done this. We're going to help you do it right now, so you don't have to look back and say, God, I wish I had someday in the future.
You had said something to me, Stephen, when we first met early on, that I don't even know if you remember saying this, but at least what I remember along those lines is you had made the comment to me, and I just thought it was an interesting perspective, that most things that we do in our lives, we have multiple chances to do them. So, you try to learn how to, I remember trying to learn how to rollerblade. Remember when rollerblading was really big? I can't do that. Some people make that look so easy, but I remember trying to do that. And yes, I did, after falling a lot, eventually get better at it. And most things that we do, we try to do something, we don't do it so well, we work at it, we get better and better with lots and lots of times attempting it. Except most of us only get one chance to be parents. So this is like the most important thing we do. And very few of us get a chance to start over and say, I didn't do that so well with my first family. I think I'm going to do this over with my next family. Now, some people do that, I guess, but not many. Most of us, we got one shot at this. And so to your point, if we don't want to have regrets about that, it would be a lot better if we were purposeful about that.
Sure. And if you think about our careers, we may do a poor job in the first job we have, or the second job, or maybe even the first company we started. But then you learn and you try again, you do something new. But right, these kids are the kids.
Yeah.
And, I think, David, you might have said something to the effect of, the best time to start building a culture is a year ago. The next best time is right now. I mean, yeah, it would have been great to have started this when our kids were 3 or 4, but even if your kids are 8 or 10 or 12, even 14 or 15, it's never too late to say, let's focus on what's important. We're here together. Parents are going to spend about 90% of the time that they will spend in their lives with their kids before they turn 18. Once your kids are past 18, they're out the door and you see them in smaller doses. And Nancy and I can both attest to this, as can you, David. You just get to less time with your kids. So while you have your kids at home, this is the time to really build those powerful connections and those powerful values that you want to embed in them while you can.
Yeah. When we think about the purposeful aspect of this, which, by the way, the name of the company is Parenting with Purpose, that has developed this. But when I think about the purposeful aspect of that, one of the things I've said to many leaders, as we relate this to families, is that when you think about parenting styles, most of us, and I would say this is how I and my wife raised our children, and most of us that are listening to this probably raised their children, is that we tried to do two things. One is we tried to set a good example. We realize our kids are watching us all the time, and we try to do our best. We're not always perfect, but we try to set a good example for our kids. But secondly, we also try to use life circumstances to teach lessons. So, your daughter doesn't make the, softball team, and you use it as a chance to talk about, well, okay, what else could we do? Or your son has a, challenge with a friend or a teacher or whatever. And okay, what do we learn about life from that? And I think for really good parents, we try to use those opportunities to teach. But there's a whole nother level of intentionality that I didn't do with my children, even though they're doing great, and that I suspect most listeners probably didn't do with theirs or don't do with theirs. And that is, what if my wife and I had, when our kids were little, decided upon a set of things that we wanted to teach and had a regular way that we taught those things day after day, week after week, so that they became internalized in our children? Wow, that's a whole different level of intentionality than I did with my children, and probably most of us did with ours.
Yeah,
I think that's the opportunity that is there for us to not have those regrets.
Yeah, we talk about this all the time, that we wish we would have had this when we were raising our families.
Yeah.
And part of what made us think about it is we have children. We want to be able to offer our children the opportunity to be really intentional about how they raise their families, and that whole notion of generational legacy. I mentioned earlier that our dad died when he was 56 years old, and he never got to meet any of his 7 grandchildren. But what Stephen and I love is that often we look at our kids or we hear something they say, and we know that that's something that they learned from our dad through us.
Mm-hmm.
So there were certain things that we really latched onto that we really wanted to teach. And we have done it, not necessarily even intentionally, just because it was important to us. And so, yeah, we think there is a lot of potential. We're not saying anyone is parenting incorrectly.
Right.
There's no caveat that, like, if you don't do this, you're not a good parent. We imagine the people who just wanted that, people are out there doing their very best. And if people are like, this makes a lot of sense to me, this resonates with me, I would like to try this and see the impact it has on my family. We have a feeling those are the people that are going to check out our family culture and hopefully have such good experiences that they're able to share with other people and say, you know what, this makes a ton of sense and we should try this.
Yeah.
And we think it's powerful enough. The impact that it has on adults is powerful enough that we think a lot of schools are going to say, we should share this with the parents in our community, because they're going to raise healthier kids that are going to come to our school more ready to learn and more cooperative and collaborative in their daily life. We think they're going to be CEOs who are going to say, I had to share this with my employees, because employees who are practicing strong fundamentals at home will show up at work differently and will be more productive employees. So I think there's a lot of benefit for this, not just in the family, but that people will carry into their communities, whether those are the work communities, whether they're school communities, or just their local communities, religious communities. So the impact of this is much greater than what happens inside the walls of your own home.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective. So this has been a fascinating conversation as we come to the end of our time together. What I hear is there's an opportunity here for parents to be way more purposeful, way more intentional, way more systematic in how they're raising perhaps the most important people in their lives. and that if there was a tool that would make that easier, that would be a pretty good thing. And that's really what this tool is all about. So where would people get access to this tool?
Yep. Well, Our Family Culture is an app, and you can find it both in the Google Play Store and in the Apple App Store.
Well, Stephen and Nancy, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating conversation. It's been a great collaboration, and hopefully this has given our audience members a whole nother way of thinking about culture, and in fact, creating culture in perhaps the most important organization they'll ever be a part of, their families. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you,
Thanks,
David.
And that's it for today's episode of Culture Architects with Stephen Shapiro and Nancy Shapiro Rapport, co-founders at Our Family Culture. If you'd like to learn more about their work and check out that powerful app, just search for Our Family Culture in the App Store or go to ourfamilyculture.org. Now, folks, if you've been enjoying what we do on this show, don't forget to subscribe on your preferred platform, and that way you'll automatically get updates on my latest episodes and guests. And if you have a minute, I'd love it if you left us a review, and that way more culture fans just like you can discover the show. And lastly, if you want to learn more about building a high-performing culture in your team or organization, check us out at CultureWise.com.
This has been Culture Architects with David J. Friedman. Join us next time for more insights and wisdom from great leaders in all walks of life. To book David for your next event or to learn more about his writing, speaking, or consulting, go to davidjfriedman.com. Culture Architects with David J. Friedman is a production of CultureWise.